The sun was setting over the small coastal town when Park heard the explosion in the sky. He dropped his wrench and looked up. Something was falling through the clouds, leaving a trail of fire and black smoke behind it. Was a simple man. He was 38 years old, a widower, and he owned a small junkyard at the edge of town. He fixed old machines and sold spare parts to anyone who needed them. It was not much, but it was enough for him and his daughter. "Daddy, what was that?" His daughter came running out of their small house. She was only 7 years old, with curious eyes and messy hair that could never seem to brush properly. "I don't know, little one, go back inside." "But I want to see." "Inside now." The little girl pouted but did as she was told. Watched the falling object crash into the hills behind his property. The ground shook under his feet. For a moment everything was quiet. Then he saw flames rising from the crash site. Every smart person in the galaxy knew about the aliens. They had made contact with Earth 30 years ago, had been just a child when the first ships appeared in the sky. The aliens had technology that humans could not understand. They had weapons that could destroy entire cities. They looked at humans the way humans looked at ants: small, weak, not important. Should have called the authorities. He should have stayed in his junkyard and minded his own business. That was the safe thing to do. That was the smart thing to do. But something in his chest told him to move. Something told him that waiting was wrong. So he grabbed his toolbox and started running toward the hills. The crash site was a mess. Trees were burning. The ground was torn apart. In the middle of it all was a small spacecraft, no bigger than a car. It was made of metal that seemed to change color when he looked at it. Smoke poured from its broken hull. Approached carefully, he had never seen an alien ship this close. He had never wanted to. The galaxy was full of creatures that could kill him without thinking. He was just a mechanic. He fixed machines. He was nothing special. But then he heard something, a small sound, a whimper. He moved closer to the ship. The door was hanging open, bent and broken from the crash. Inside, through the smoke, he could see a figure. It was small, too small. Climbed into the wreckage without thinking. The metal was hot, burning his hands, but he did not stop. When he reached the figure, his heart almost stopped. It was a child. She looked like a human girl, maybe his age, but her skin was pale blue, covered in delicate scales that shimmered in the fading light. Small horns rose from her forehead, curved and elegant. Behind her back, thin wings were folded tight against her body, torn and bleeding from the crash. I knew what she was immediately. Everyone knew about they were the Dragon People, one of the three great powers in the galaxy. They ruled over hundreds of worlds. Their warriors were said to be invincible. Their technology was beyond anything humans could create, and they were proud, so very proud. The girl's leg was bent at a wrong angle. Broken, badly, she was unconscious, her breathing shallow and weak. Blue blood leaked from wounds all over her body. Knew he should not touch her. He knew they were protective of their children. He knew that a human touching one of their young could start a war. He knew he could die for this. But she was just a child, a hurt, scared, bleeding child. He lifted her gently from the wreckage. She was lighter than he expected, her body warm against his chest. She made a small sound of pain, and he whispered soft words to calm her, the same words he used when had nightmares. "It's okay, I've got you, you're going to be okay." He carried her down the hill, moving as fast as he could without hurting her more. By the time he reached his house, his arms were shaking with exhaustion. Was waiting at the door. Her eyes went wide when she saw what her father was carrying. "Daddy, is that an alien?" "Yes, sweetheart, she's hurt. I need you to get the first aid kit, the big one." Ran to obey. She was scared, but she was also her father's daughter. When something needed to be done, you did it. You could be scared later. Laid the dragon girl on his bed. He looked at her broken leg, at her wounded wings, at her pale face. He was not a doctor, he was not even close, but he had fixed machines his whole life. He understood how things fit together. He understood how to make broken things work again. He set to work. He cleaned her wounds with the supplies he had. He set her leg as carefully as he could, using pieces of metal from his junkyard as a splint. He wrapped her injuries with clean bandages. It was not perfect. It was not even good, but it was the best he could do. When he finally finished, hours had passed. The sky outside was dark. Had fallen asleep in a chair beside the bed, her small hand resting near the dragon girl's clawed fingers. Sat on the floor, exhausted. He looked at the two children, one human and one alien, both so small and fragile. He wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. He wondered if soldiers would come for him tomorrow. He wondered if he would live to see another sunrise. But when the dragon girl whimpered in her sleep, reaching out blindly for comfort, he took her hand and held it gently. "Sleep now," he said softly. "I'll keep you safe." Far above the earth, hidden among the stars, a massive ship floated in the darkness. It was a dreadnought, a warship capable of destroying entire planets. On its bridge, surrounded by soldiers and advisors, Lady watched a holographic display. The display showed her daughter, it showed the crash, it showed the human carrying Sora from the wreckage, it showed him working through the night to save her life. Lady was the supreme commander of the Third Fleet. She was one of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. She had burned worlds, she had ended civilizations, she had watched entire species beg for mercy and found them wanting. But now she watched a simple human, a man with nothing but a toolbox and a kind heart, risk everything to save a child he had never met. A child of a species that viewed him as less than nothing. Her advisors spoke of retrieval missions. They spoke of punishing the human for his presumption. One even suggested destroying the entire region to eliminate witnesses. She silenced them with a look. "No," she said, her voice cold as ice. "We wait, we watch, I want to see what this human does." She leaned forward, her ancient eyes fixed on the display. The human was holding her daughter's hand, humming some primitive song to help her sleep. It was strange, it was confusing, it was almost beautiful. Lady did not understand, but she wanted to, and so she watched and she waited and she did not look away. 1 week passed since the crash. The dragon girl finally opened her eyes. Was in the kitchen making soup when he heard the scream. He dropped the pot and ran to the bedroom. The girl was awake, pressed against the wall, her eyes wild with fear. Her scales had turned darker, almost purple, and her small claws were out, ready to fight. "Where am I?" she demanded. Her voice was high and scared, but she was trying hard to sound strong. "What is this place? Where is my mother?" Stopped at the door, he raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. "You are safe," he said calmly. "You crashed near my home, I found you and brought you here. My name is I am not going to hurt you." The girl's eyes moved around the room. She saw the old furniture, the cracked walls, the simple blankets. Her face showed confusion, then something like disgust. "This is a primitive dwelling," she said. "You are human, you should be on your knees before me. I am Sora of House. My mother is the supreme commander of the Third Fleet. She will come for me and she will destroy you for touching me." Nodded slowly. "Okay, would you like some soup while you wait for her to destroy me?" Sora blinked. She had expected fear. She had expected begging. She had not expected soup. Before she could answer, a small face appeared behind legs. Peeked into the room, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Is she awake? Can I talk to her now?" Tried to hold his daughter back but was faster. She ran into the room and stopped right in front of Sora, looking at her with pure wonder. "Hi, your scales are so pretty. Can you really fly? Daddy said you have wings but they're hurt. Does it hurt a lot? I fell off my bike once and it hurt a lot. Do you want to see my toys?" Sora stared at the human child. In her entire life, no one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever ignored her title, her power, her family name. This tiny creature with messy hair and dirty fingers was looking at her like she was just another kid. It was strange, it was wrong, it was kind of nice. My wings are damaged," Sora said slowly. "I cannot fly yet, and yes, it hurts." "That's okay," said brightly. "Daddy fixed your leg, he's really good at fixing things. He can probably fix your wings too. Do you want some soup? It's really good." "Well, it's okay, Daddy tries hard." Sighed. "Thank you for that honest review." The next few days were difficult. Sora was not an easy patient. She complained about everything. The food was too simple, the bed was too hard, the house was too small. She demanded servants, only to be told there were none. She demanded better medicine, only to learn that had spent his savings on the supplies he had. But slowly, something began to change. Sora watched work. He woke up before the sun rose and worked until long after it set. He fixed old machines that other people threw away. He sold parts for small amounts of money. Every coin he earned went toward food, medicine, and keeping the lights on. He never complained, he never rested, and he never treated Sora like a burden even though she was. One night, Sora could not sleep because of the pain in her leg. She limped out of the bedroom and found at his workbench, fixing some broken device by candlelight. His hands were rough and covered in grease and small burns. "Why do you work so hard?" she asked. Looked up, surprised to see her awake. "Because I have a daughter to feed, and now I have a guest who eats 3 times what my daughter does." Sora felt her face grow warm with embarrassment. "I can pay you back. When my mother comes, she will give you anything you want." Smiled gently. "I don't want payment, little one, I just want you to get better." "Why?" Sora demanded. My people look down on yours, we call you primitives, we think you are barely worth noticing, why would you help me?" Put down his tools and looked at her with tired but kind eyes. "Because you were hurt and alone and scared, because you are a child who needed help, that's all that matters to me. The rest of it, the politics and the species and the power, none of that means anything when a kid is bleeding in the dark. Sora did not know what to say. In her world, everything was about power. Everything was about status. No one did anything without expecting something in return. But this human, this poor and simple mechanic, wanted nothing from her except for her to get better. It made no sense, it made her want to cry. The real change came through. The little human girl refused to treat Sora like a princess. She dragged Sora into her small world of games and adventures. They played with old toys. They drew pictures with broken crayons. They caught insects in the junkyard and gave them names. One afternoon, decided they should build a fort out of old blankets and boxes. Sora had never built anything in her life. In her palace on her home world, servants did everything for her, but did not care about that. She just handed Sora a blanket and told her to help. An hour later, they had the worst fort in history. It was lopsided, full of holes, and kept falling down. But when they finally got it to stand for more than a minute, cheered like they had won a great battle. And Sora found herself cheering too. That night when came to check on them, he found both girls asleep in the terrible fort, his arm thrown over Sora's wing, both of them smiling in their dreams. He stood there for a long time watching them. Then he pulled a blanket over them both and went back to work. Far above, Lady continued to watch. Her advisors had stopped suggesting attacks. They had stopped asking when she would retrieve her daughter. They had learned that the Supreme Commander wanted silence and they gave it to her. She watched Sora build the fort. She watched her daughter laugh, really laugh, for the first time in years. She watched the human child treat her princess like an equal, like a friend, like family. And she watched the father. The tired, poor father who gave everything he had for 2 children, one of whom was not even his. Lady had lived for centuries. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had commanded armies and decided the fate of billions. She thought she knew everything about the universe. But she did not understand this. She did not understand how someone with so little could give so much. She did not understand how kindness could exist without expecting anything in return. She decided she needed to find out. "Prepare my personal ship," she told her guard. "I am going down to the surface." The guard hesitated. "Alone, my lady." "Alone? Is that wise?" Lady's eyes glowed with inner fire. "I did not ask for your opinion on wisdom. I asked you to prepare my ship." The guard bowed and left quickly. Lady looked back at the display, at her daughter sleeping peacefully in a blanket fort with a human child, watched over by a human man who had nothing and gave everything. She did not know what she would find on the surface. She did not know what she would say or do, but she knew she had to go. She knew she had to understand. The universe, it seemed, still had things to teach her. Was fixing an old generator when the sky broke open. It started with a sound, like thunder but deeper, like the universe itself was being torn apart. He dropped his tools and looked up. The clouds were splitting, pushed aside by something massive descending through the atmosphere. Then he saw her. She came down on wings that stretched wider than his entire house. Her scales were black as midnight, gleaming with an inner light that hurt to look at. Her eyes burned like twin suns, ancient and terrible and full of power beyond human understanding. The ground cracked under her feet when she landed, the earth itself giving way before her. Lady had arrived. Stood frozen, his heart pounded in his chest. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, to hide, to get as far away as possible from this creature of legend. This was a supreme commander. This was a being who had destroyed worlds, ended civilizations, commanded armies that stretched across galaxies. And she was standing in his junkyard. But then he heard something behind him, a small sound, calling from the house asking what was happening, and somewhere in there was Sora, still healing, still vulnerable. Something changed the fear did not disappear, but something else grew beside it, something stronger. He picked up his wrench and stepped forward. Lady watched him approach with something like amusement. This tiny creature, this fragile human with his primitive tool, was walking toward her instead of running away. It was absurd, it was pathetic, it was. He stopped between her and the house. He raised his wrench. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "If you're here to hurt them," he said, "you'll have to go through me first." Lady blinked. For a moment she was too surprised to speak. Then she laughed. It was not a cruel laugh or a mocking one. It was genuine, like she had just seen something truly unexpected. "Human," she said, her voice echoing with power, "do you know who I am?" "I don't care who you are. There are children in that house. If you want to hurt them, you'll have to kill me. I could kill you with a thought. I could turn this entire region to ash with a single word. You are nothing to me, less than nothing." Nodded, "Probably, but I'm still not moving." Lady studied him. She had faced warriors who commanded armies. She had dueled champions who had trained for centuries. She had met beings who considered themselves gods. None of them had impressed her as much as this simple mechanic with his useless wrench and his trembling hands and his absolute refusal to back down. "I am not here to hurt anyone," she said finally. "I am here to see my daughter." His eyes went wide. Sora is your daughter." "She is. I have been watching from orbit since she crashed. I have seen everything you have done for her. I have seen how you saved her life, how you cared for her, how your daughter befriended her." She paused. "I have also seen you stand before me with a wrench, prepared to die for a child not your own." Slowly lowered his wrench. His brain was still catching up to what was happening. This impossibly powerful being was Sora's mother, and she had been watching the whole time. "She's inside," he said. "She's been asking for you. Every night she misses you." Something flickered in Lady's burning eyes, something that looked almost like pain. "Take me to her." Led her toward the house. He walked in front of her, which was probably foolish. She could kill him easily from behind, but somehow he did not think she would. There was something in her eyes now that was not just power and authority. There was something that looked almost grateful. Sora was in the living room when they entered. She was sitting playing some kind of card game that had made up with rules that changed every minute. When she saw her mother duck through the doorway, her whole face changed. "Mama." She ran forward on her still healing leg, not caring about the pain. Lady dropped to her knees, her terrifying form suddenly looking almost gentle. She caught her daughter in her arms and held her close, making sounds in their ancient language that needed no translation. A mother holding her child, a child safe in her mother's arms. Watched from the couch, her eyes wide, put a hand on her shoulder and pulled her close. They stayed quiet, not wanting to interrupt the moment. Finally, Sora pulled back. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. "Mama, I have so much to tell you. She's my friend, and this is her father. He saved me and fixed my leg, and he makes really bad soup, but he tries hard, and we built a fort yesterday and caught bugs and—" Lady listened to her daughter ramble. She looked around the small, shabby house with its cracked walls and old furniture. She saw the simple food in the kitchen, the worn toys on the floor, the patches where had tried to repair things with whatever he could find. It was nothing. It was less than nothing compared to the palaces where Sora had grown up. But her daughter was happy, truly happy in a way that Lady had not seen in years. "Mama," Sora said, tugging on her mother's clawed hand, "can we stay? Just for a little while. I want to show you everything. I want you to meet Mr. Whiskers, that's the bug I named, and I want you to try the soup. It's really not that bad and—" "Sora," Lady's voice was gentle but firm, "I came to bring you home." Sora's face fell. But I don't want to go yet. I like it here. Is my friend, can't we stay just a little longer?" Lady looked at her daughter's pleading eyes. Then she looked at the human man who had saved her life. Met her gaze without flinching. He did not beg, he did not plead. He just stood there, his hand on his daughter's shoulder, waiting for her decision. In that moment, Lady understood something. This human had given her daughter something that all the palaces and servants and tutors could not. He had given her normalcy. He had given her a friend. He had given her a taste of a life where she was not a princess but just a kid. And he had done it expecting nothing in return. 3 days, Lady said slowly. We will stay 3 days. Sora's face lit up like a star-going supernova. Really, really, truly. Really, truly. Sora grabbed his hand and pulled her toward the door. Come on, I want to show Mama the fort and the bugs and the place where we saw the big fish. The two girls ran outside, their laughter echoing through the junkyard. Lady watched them go, something softening in her ancient eyes. Cleared his throat awkwardly. I don't exactly have guest rooms for alien royalty, but you're welcome to stay. I can sleep on the couch and... Humans. He stopped talking. Lady turned to face him fully. She was still terrifying, still powerful beyond imagination, but there was something different in her expression now. You stood before me with a wrench, she said. You were prepared to die for my daughter, a child of a species that considers yours worthless. Why? Thought about the question. He thought about the night he found Sora in the wreckage, bleeding and scared. He thought about the days that followed, watching her heal, watching her become friends with, watching her learn to smile. Because that's what you do, he said simply. When a child needs help, you help them. When someone is hurt and scared, you don't ask what species they are or how powerful their parents are. You just help, because that's what being a person means. Lady stared at him for a long moment, then slowly she nodded. Perhaps, she said, your species is not as primitive as we believed. Shrugged, maybe, we're still pretty bad at making soup though. For the second time that day, Lady laughed. and for the first time in centuries, she found herself looking forward to the days ahead. The first day was strange. Lady did not know what to do with herself. She was used to commanding fleets, making decisions that affected billions of lives, planning military campaigns that spanned entire star systems. She was not used to sitting in a junkyard, watching her daughter chase bugs with a human child. She tried to maintain her dignity. She perched on the roof of the small house like a gargoyle, her massive wings folded against her back, observing everything with cold, scientific interest. This was research, she told herself. She was studying this primitive species to understand their weaknesses. But then came up to the roof with a cup of tea. Here, the little girl said brightly, "Daddy said you might be thirsty, I made it myself." Lady looked at the cup. The tea was too pale, poorly steeped. The cup was chipped and old. A servant who brought her such a thing would have been dismissed immediately. But was looking at her with hopeful eyes, so similar to the way Sora looked when she wanted something. And Lady found herself taking the cup and drinking. It was terrible, it was weak and flavorless and barely warm. "Thank you," she said, "it is acceptable." Beamed like she had just received the greatest compliment in the universe. She sat down next to Lady without any fear, her small legs dangling off the edge of the roof. "Are you really Sora's mom? You don't look alike, she's blue and you're black. Is that because you're older? Will she turn black when she grows up? Do you really have a spaceship? Can I see it? How fast does it go?" The questions came faster than Lady could answer. She found herself explaining things she had never bothered to explain before, about growth patterns, about her ship orbiting above them, about the worlds she had seen and the stars she had traveled. Listened with wide eyes, asking more questions, always more questions. She was not afraid of Lady. She was not impressed by her power or intimidated by her presence. She was just curious, the way only children can be. When called them down for dinner, Lady realized she had spent 2 hours talking to a 7-year-old human, and she had enjoyed it. The second day was harder. A storm came in from the sea, bringing heavy rain and cold winds. The temperature dropped quickly. Lady was comfortable, her dragon blood keeping her warm, but she noticed the humans shivering. Then the heating system broke. Discovered it in the evening. The old machine had finally given up after years of being pushed too hard. He looked at it with tired eyes, calculating how much a repair would cost, knowing he could not afford it. "I can fix it," he said. "It'll just take some time." He started working immediately. The house grew colder and colder, but he refused to stop. His fingers turned blue from the chill. His breath came out in white clouds, but he kept going, soldering connections and replacing worn parts with things he found in his junkyard. Lady watched from the corner. She could fix the problem instantly with her technology, one signal to her ship and they would have a heating system that could warm an entire palace. But something stopped her from offering. Instead, she found herself walking over and standing beside him. "What do you need?" she asked. Looked up surprised. I need someone to hold this piece in place while I connect it." Lady knelt down beside him. Her massive claws, designed for tearing through warship hulls, gently held a small piece of metal in exactly the right position. Worked around her, explaining what he was doing, sometimes asking her to adjust her grip or hold something else. They worked together through the night. The children slept under piles of blankets, Sora's natural warmth keeping comfortable. But Lady stayed awake, fighting against the cold, refusing to give up. At dawn, the heater sputtered, coughed, then roared to life, filling the house with blessed warmth. Leaned back, exhausted but triumphant. His hands were covered in grease and small cuts. His face was pale from the cold and the long night without sleep, but he was grinning, a wide and honest smile. "Not bad for a couple of amateurs, right?" Lady looked at him, then she felt something strange happen to her face, something she had not felt in centuries. She was smiling back. The third day brought danger. There was a gang in the area, scavengers who took what they wanted from those too weak to stop them. They had been watching junkyard for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment came in the afternoons. 5 men came through the gate, armed with weapons and bad intentions. Their leader was a large man with cruel eyes and a crooked smile. "Nice little place you got here," he said, looking around at the piles of salvage. "We're going to take it, all of it. You can walk away or you can get hurt, your choice." Stepped in front of the house. Behind him, through the window, he could see Sora watching with frightened eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. The leaders laughed. "You and what armies?" Lady walked out of the house. She did not transform. She did not unleash her power. She simply walked forward and stood beside, her eyes beginning to glow with inner fire. The men looked at her scales, at her wings, at her claws. at her eyes that held the promise of absolute destruction. "You can leave," Lady said, her voice calm and cold, "or you can discover what happens to those who threaten my family." The word hung in the air, family. She had said it without thinking, but she did not take it back. The men ran. They ran faster than they had ever run before, dropping their weapons, not looking back. They would never speak of this day. They would never return. Lady watched them go. Then she looked down at who was looking up at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You called us family," he said. "I spoke without thinking. Did you mean it?" Lady did not answer, but she did not deny it either. That night after the children were asleep, Lady made her offer. "Come with us," she said. "I can give you wealth beyond imagination, a home on one of the core worlds, protection, status, power, everything a human could want. Your daughter would have the best education, the best opportunities, you would never struggle again." Sat quietly for a long moment. He looked around his junkyard at the piles of old machines and spare parts. He looked at the house, small and shabby but filled with memories. He looked at the sky where the stars were beginning to appear. "That's a generous offer," he said, "more than I deserve." "You deserve far more than you realize." Smiled sadly. "Maybe, but this is our home, was born here. My wife is buried on the hill behind the house. Everything we are, everything we have is right here in this place." He looked at Lady with steady eyes. "I don't need palaces, Commander. I don't need wealth or power or status. I just need my daughter and a purpose. I have both of those here. Taking away the struggle wouldn't make my life better. It would just make it empty." Lady stared at him. In all her centuries of life, she had never met anyone who turned down power. She had never met anyone who chose hardship over comfort, struggle over ease, meaning over pleasure. She did not understand, but somehow she respected it more than anything she had encountered in years. "You are a strange creature, Park," she said finally. "So I've been told." She turned to look at the stars. Somewhere up there her fleet waited, her responsibilities waited, the life she had always known waited. But right now she was not ready to return to it. "Perhaps I will extend our stay," she said quietly. Nodded. "You're always welcome here, Commander, for however long you want." For a long time they sat in silence, watching the stars together. And for the first time in centuries, Lady felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Peace. 1 year had passed since the dragon fell from the sky. The junkyard looked different now, but not in the ways most people would expect. The piles of salvage were still there, rusty and worn. The small house still stood with its cracked walls and patched roof, still woke before dawn and worked until his hands ached. But in the corner of the yard, gleaming softly in the morning light, stood something that did not belong. A quantum communications array, technology so advanced that Earth's greatest scientists could not understand how it worked. A gift from the Third Fleet, installed by engineers who bowed to with respect that confused him. Every evening would sit in front of the array and talk to Sora. Despite the light years between them, their voices were clear and immediate. They talked about everything and nothing the way best friends do, school projects and silly jokes, dreams and fears. The bug collection had started, the flying lessons Sora was taking. Would listen to them sometimes, smiling at the sound of their laughter echoing across the galaxy. Word had spread through the stars, carried on whispers and rumors, the story of the human who saved a dragon princess, the mechanic who faced down a supreme commander with a wrench, the father who chose kindness over caution, compassion over fear. At first, most aliens dismissed it as myth. Humans were primitives after all, weak and short-lived, barely worth noticing. Surely the story was exaggerated. But then the diplomats started arriving. The first was Ambassador, coming to open formal relations between Earth and the Dragon Empire. She brought gifts and proposals, treaties and trade agreements. When asked why they had suddenly taken interest in humanity, she smiled mysteriously and said nothing. Others followed. Species that had ignored Earth for decades now sent representatives. They wanted to meet these humans who had earned the respect of Lady. They wanted to understand what made this species special. Watched the news reports with bemusement. Diplomats and politicians talked about humanity's potential, about Earth's emerging role in galactic affairs. They used big words and complex phrases that made his head hurt. He did not understand politics, he just fixed machines. But understood something simpler. "Daddy," she said one night, "are we famous now?" "I think maybe we are, little ones." "Is it because of Sora?" "It's because of a lot of things." Nodded seriously. "Good, famous means more people will know that aliens are nice. Well, some aliens, the ones like Sora and her mom." Hugged his daughter and did not say anything. Sometimes children understood things better than adults. Lady came back every few months. She told herself it was diplomatic observation, strategic interest in an emerging species, important research into human psychology and social structures. Her advisors believed her, or at least they pretended to. But every time she descended from orbit, she did not go to government buildings or diplomatic halls. She went to a junkyard on the coast, where a tired mechanic would greet her with terrible tea and honest conversation. They would sit on the roof and watch the sunset, would talk about school projects, his plans to rebuild an old hovercraft for her birthday, the weird customer who had tried to pay him in fish. Normal things, small things, things that had nothing to do with empires or fleets or the fate of civilizations. Lady listened to all of it. She asked questions about things she did not understand: human holidays, human food, human music, human love. She had commanded fleets. She had ended wars. She had been called the most dangerous being in 3-star systems. But sitting here listening to a mechanic ramble about his daughter, she felt something she had almost forgotten was possible: connection, belonging, home. One evening, after a particularly long conversation, asked her something he had been wondering for months. "Why do you keep coming back?" Lady looked at him. She could have given him a political answer, a strategic answer, a proper answer befitting a supreme commander. Instead, she told the truth. "Because here I am not a weapon, I am not a symbol of power or destruction, I am just a mother whose daughter made a friend, a guest who is always welcome, someone who can drink bad tea and watch sunsets and not worry about the weight of empires." She paused, searching for the right words. "You gave my daughter something precious, Park. You gave her normalcy, you gave her friendship. You showed her that worth is not measured by power or status but by kindness and courage." She looked at him with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "And you showed me the same thing." Did not know what to say, so he just poured her more terrible tea and watched the stars come out. The day Sora returned for an extended visit was the day everything came together. She had grown in the past year. Her scales had darkened toward her mother's obsidian shade. Her wings were fully functional now, strong and graceful. She looked more like a young warrior than the scared child had pulled from the wreckage. But when ran out to greet her, all that fell away. "Sora, Sora, you're here." Sora caught her friend in a hug that lifted off the ground. They were laughing and crying and talking over each other, trying to say a year's worth of things in a single breath. Watch them with tears in his eyes. Lady stood beside him, her expression soft in a way her soldiers would never believe. "Look at them," she said quietly. "I'm looking." A human and a once we thought the distance between our species was too great to bridge. We thought we had nothing in common, nothing to share, nothing to learn from each other. She gestured at the two girls, now running toward the shore, their laughter echoing across the junkyard. "We were wrong." The girls spent the afternoon by the water. They built and chased waves and talked about everything they had missed. Sora showed how her wings worked now, letting her friend feel the strong membranes, promising to take her flying someday when she was bigger. Showed Sora the new bugs she had found, giving them names and backstories that made Sora laugh until her sides hurt. As the sun began to set and Lady walked down to join them, the four of them sat on the sand, watching the sky turn orange and pink and purple. "Can we do this forever?" asked sleepily, leaning against her father. "Nothing lasts forever," little one said. "But this can last a long time," Lady added, "as long as we choose to make it last." Sora nodded seriously. "I'm going to come back every year, and when I'm old enough, I'm going to bring to see I'll show her everything. And I'll bring Sora to all the cool places on Earth," said, "like the ice cream shop and the beach with the big rocks, and everywhere else," Sora finished. The two girls grinned at each other, their plans stretching out into a future full of possibilities. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, Lady and sat on the roof one last time. The stars were bright above them, each one a sun with its own worlds, its own stories, its own possibilities. "You could have turned her over to the authorities," Lady said. "You could have used her as leverage, you could have demanded payment. Why didn't you?" It was the question she had asked before in different words, but this time she was not asking out of confusion. She was asking because she wanted to hear the answer again. Considered the question. He looked up at the stars, then back at the house where his daughter and her friend were sleeping peacefully. "She was hurt," he said simply. "She was scared, she was just a kid, wouldn't you have done the same?" Lady thought about her advisor's recommendations a year ago, the generals who urged destruction, the nobles who saw humans as beneath notice, the voices telling her that strength was the only language worth speaking. She thought about a mechanic with a wrench standing between her and the children. She thought about terrible tea and sunset conversations and the sound of girls laughing in a junkyard. She thought about what she had learned from this small family on this small world, in this small corner of the galaxy. I would now, she said. Smiled and handed her another cup of tea. It was still terrible, she drank it anyway. Above them, the stars continued their endless dance. Somewhere out there, fleets moved and empires clashed, and the great machinery of galactic politics ground forward. But here, in a junkyard on Earth, two people from different worlds sat together in peace. And somehow, that mattered more than all the rest of it combined.